Welcome to the ODDSBREAKER'S #1 place for shared, sharp betting information.
Welcome back to podcast 28 of 2020. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can follow us on Twitter at the ODDSBREAKERS, social media / the ODDSBREAKERS. This episode is being brought to you by mybookie.ag for a 50% sign-up bonus. Please visit MyBookie and use the promo code TheOddsBreakers. Terms and conditions apply. If you'd like to help us out with our costs and sponsor the podcast, we would love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com, click shop, and become a member. For $17.99 a month, you can get my plays and premium plays before the line moves. For $2 more, you can have all that and become a patron subscriber. Get the podcast a little bit early, and if nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free picks newsletter subscriber. My friends, we have a great show for you today, continuing about the NFL and NFL season totals, futures, etc. Lots more to discuss. It looks like we're going to be diving into the NFC West and the NFC East. Before we get into that, it looks like Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield are pretty close to having a rematch in the ring. A very geriatric rematch of two old men trying to beat each other up.
Come on, don't bullshit me.
Now, this is a thing. This is a thing. And it looks like it could really happen here. And it's probably going to happen because they're going to make millions of dollars to pay all of those bills. America will pay for that because America runs on nostalgia. You know, seeing some garbage, old, washed up boxers fight each other in a ring and pay massive amounts of money to see it.
Unreal.
You know? Why do we think like that? Why do we have to go back to something that's been done a bunch of times and just have to see it again? I mean, when they're 80 years old, practically in wheelchairs, and once again broke, are we going to have to go through this again? You know, when does this stop? You know? When does it stop? And we're doing the same thing with Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson. You know, we have to see them face off. At least they're not as old and they still have some game left, but they're not the best at golf anymore. I mean, what about maybe Koepka versus Johnson versus Dustin Johnson? Wouldn't that be more entertaining, being that they are at the top of their game?
That's terrible.
What about Justin Thomas versus Rory McIlroy? You know? I mean, this is silly. So, they're slated to make millions of dollars if this happens. More than most of their PGA year playing golf. Being that this would be a another pay-per-view event. So, you know, the purse on this would be absolutely giant, and the endorsements they get from it might even be even bigger. But at the same time, why do we pay for these things? Why do we have to feel like we have to go back into the past on some of our favorite athletes and see them play when they're old. I don't know. I have no idea what that is and what makes us do that. But if Tyson does fight Holyfield, I can tell you that I will not be buying that pay-per-view. I have zero ambition. I don't even know if Holyfield has any ears left. Maybe he's got to wear some sort of ear protectors this time. I mean, the third time's the charm, right? I'm sure there's going to be odds on if Mike Tyson is going to take a bite out of what is left of Evander Holyfield's ears. Not sure about that. But at the same time, I do not care about two old-ass boxers in their 50s trying to beat each other up. I mean, is that even safe? You know? Is that even safe? It always baffles me why people have to reach back into their past to keep seeing the same thing again, even though there are multiple people that would kick both of their asses right now. Multiple boxers would kick the shit out of Mike Tyson right now. Multiple boxers would kick the shit out of Evander Holyfield right now. Okay? So what I'm saying is there's absolutely no reason to have this out. If it does become a thing, which I think it will become a thing, I can guarantee you that I will not be buying that pay-per-view myself. Instead, I'm going to go to a friend's house and watch it.
Hell no, to the no, no, no. Hell to the no, hell to the no, to the no, no, no.
All right, let's get right into our NFL season win totals, starting with the NFC West. Before I get into the NFC West, it's kind of the perfect conference to talk about this, is that I want to make sure that people know that strength of schedule should be based upon your power ratings or Vegas win totals. Okay? That's what a strength of schedule is, really. And the reason that going by last year's winning percentages is bad is because, for example, whoever's playing the Patriots is going to be looked at as a hard game, making their schedule look harder, yet they lost Tom Brady and their wins have dropped roughly 3.5 or 4 from what they actually did last year. So I would rather go by what the Patriots are projected to be rather than what they actually are. It was kind of the same thing with San Francisco the year before when Jimmy G got hurt. If you used their winning percentage, which they won 3 or 4 games, you were way off because San Fran won 13 or 14 games last year. All right. So huge difference in looking at that. And I also wanted to say that when looking for value in the NFL, it's always better to take plus money. And the reason that is because the fluctuations in schedule. You know, if you had an easy schedule, you're going to be, and you did really well, first in your division, you're going to be punished with your 2 at-large games. Not to mention, teams will be gunning for you even more the next year. Okay? That's why up-and-coming teams are supposed to have some value in the NFL, where they try to, make the good teams lower and the bad teams higher. They do that with draft picks. The first pick goes to the worst team. The last pick goes to the best team for one. And the strength of actual schedule. Okay? Just like I went over. So remember that. I always try to lean towards the plus money here. Let's get started with the NFC West here. And this conference was very strong last year, even the last 2 years, because when the Rams were up there, Seattle's always been up there. And obviously San Francisco made that huge step forward. But the NFC West has to play the AFC East and the NFC East division in their schedule. And of course, they play each other twice. And looking at that, that's good for the NFC West, really, except for the travel. Okay. But the AFC East is going to be worse with the Patriots regressing. You still have, the Jets and the Dolphins. Now, the Dolphins should improve a little bit. Buffalo's probably the toughest there. And then the NFC East was the worst division in football. Okay. What's interesting about the NFC West is some of these teams have asked the NFL to schedule the East Coast games back to back so they can actually stay out there and eliminate travel. That's going to be an interesting spot to look at when they do that, to play on those teams the next game. They are not traveling again. Now, eventually, the bettors are going to pick up on that, but maybe if you can get a line early enough, that might be one to look at. So the Giants and Redskins very, very pushover those games for the NFC West when they play them. The Eagles are kind of trending down. The AFC East, like I said, the Patriots are taking a big step back unless Belichick pulls a rabbit out of his hat. And just the strength of the NFC West is interesting because the Cardinals are supposed to be better. The Seahawks and Rams have always been there. Rams just missed the playoffs last year, and the 49ers with Kyle Shanahan are the 49ers. Yeah. So, medium easy in general. The San Francisco 49ers. Was that a dog? Anyways, the 49ers. Their win total is 10.5 juiced to the over. Okay? Minus 125. At-large games versus Green Bay and New Orleans. Key losses: wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders, running back Matt Breida, tight end Levine Toliolo, and defensive tackle Shelton Day. Key additions: guard Tom Compton, coming straight out of Compton.
You're fired.
Defensive end Kerry Hyder, and wide receiver Travis Benjamin, whom they drafted. Really two picks that stick out to me, Javon Kinlaw and Brandon Ayuk, wide receiver. Kinlaw is a defensive lineman from, I believe, South Carolina, pretty highly ranked. So the Super Bowl ended strangely for this team, in my opinion. It looked like Kyle Shanahan didn't have a ton of confidence in Jimmy Garoppolo. Look at that end of the second quarter. Thank God we hit that first half under, right? So you have to wonder if that weirdness filters into the season. The good news is that the schedule is only medium in difficulty. It means that, the AFC East and the NFC East, they're bad, right? And the beginning of their schedule is really interesting with the second game at the Jets and then the Giants the week right after. So I find that, just like I said, smart that they called in and had it scheduled the same stadium, right? So, good for the Niners for doing that. It really helps out their travel in this conference this year for doing that. This team, they didn't gain a lot, really, with a light draft. And I have to punish them slightly for losing Breida and Emmanuel Sanders and Day, but here's kind of how I have it broke down. The Niners had 13 wins last year, 12 win Pythagorean. It comes to 12.5 on average. No adjustment for injury. Medium schedule last year, medium schedule this year, no adjustments. Take out about 3/4 of a game for the players they lost. I'm not going to give them anything really back for draft and free agency. I have them because, they only had two or three guys there, in my opinion, that look like they make a slight difference. I have their wins at 11.75. All right. That might be a little high even, but the Vegas has them at 10.5. But 10.5 with juice to the over is not enough for me to take it when I have 1.25 game discrepancy. I'm going to lean to the over on the San Francisco 49ers. Next, we have the Seattle Seahawks. Win total 9, juice to the over at -140. All right. At-large games versus Minnesota and Dallas. Key losses, tackle George Fant, defensive tackle Quentin Jefferson, guard DJ Fluker, defensive end Jadeveon Clowney. Key additions, tackle Brandon Shell, center BJ Finney, tight end Greg Olsen, defensive end Bruce Irvin, and tackle Cedric Ogbuel. Whom they drafted, linebacker Jordan Brooks, edge rusher Darryl Taylor, and guard/center Damian Lewis. Here we go again with the immensely overachieving Russell Wilson team, Seahawks. They did a lot of robbing Peter to pay Paul in the offseason, but the good news is they kind of revamped their offensive line. That was a weak spot, and maybe, just maybe, their blocking will be improved. Coming from Pro Football Focus, their offensive line only ranked 27th last year. Okay, so I like that. Their schedule is ranked medium, but like I said about distance in this conference or in this division, they have to go to Atlanta, Miami, Buffalo, and Washington all at different times. I like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. All right, I like them a ton. And if Will Dissly and Greg Olsen stay healthy this season in tight ends, I expect Seattle to once again compete for the NFC West. I expect them. My number, I got it to 9.4. All right. So this is how I came up with it. Seattle, 11 wins last year. Their Pythagorean was only 8.2. They weren't exactly blowing opponents away, right? So that averages to about a 9.6. They were very healthy last year, so I'm taking a game away from the health standpoint. They have a very hard schedule last year, so I'm adding a point back. Medium schedule this year, keeping it kosher there. Taking away 3/4 of a game, 0.75 for who they lost, and I'm only giving them a half game back for who they get back. I think Clowney did a lot for them towards the end of the season last year, so a little bit on the negative there. But that brings me to 9.4 wins, and the Vegas win total is 9, juice to the over. It's actually almost exactly at 9.4, so no play on the Seattle Seahawks, but I expect them to possibly contend for the division. The next one we have is the Los Angeles Rams. Rams had 9 wins last year. You know, their win total is 8.5, juice to the under. I'm seeing a lot of people on the fade train on the Rams so far this year. Schedule, medium hard. At-large games versus Chicago and the New York Giants. Key losses, running back Todd Gurley, defensive end Dante Fowler, linebacker Corey Littleton, kicker Greg Zuerlein, Legatron, cornerback Nickel Roby Coleman, outside linebacker Clay Matthews, quarterback Blake Bortles. They lost a lot, really. Minus Bortles, I guess. Key additions, defensive tackle A'Shawn Robinson, outside linebacker Leonard Floyd. Not much. Whom they drafted, running back Cam Akers, wide receiver Van Jefferson, edge rusher Terrell Lewis. This Rams team had it very difficult since losing the Super Bowl. They had the hardest schedule last year according to efficiency, and now they have a medium hard schedule, mostly due to the success of the Seahawks and the 49ers. The Rams have lost a ton in free agency, I think, this year. The Todd Gurley situation was always weird, but he's gone. Don't matter no more. They shed Clay Matthews, Dante Fowler, Corey Littleton, Legatron. That's a lot. That's a lot of people. The concern I have is that they kind of cheaped out here on the edge rusher, especially on the edge rusher. Now, we know they have Aaron Donald. He's the best 3 technique out there, right? And they signed Leonard Floyd, which was kind of the Bears' garbage pick from a couple years back. He's very athletic and strong. His problem was, it wasn't that he was one of those look like Tarzan, play like Jane type people. He was one of those more looking like Tarzan, thinks like the Tiger King.
Idiot!
He wasn't that bright. He gets schooled on screen passes, and I actually think that sometimes teams would actually purposely audible to running backs in the flat or screen passes, tight end screens, where Floyd should have stopped rushing the passer and instead covered the receiver, running back, whatever. But instead, he went right at the quarterback, and they break out for 5 to 20 yards. That was Floyd's problem. It was brains. So you wonder if that's going to change here in this Rams system. But I'm very skeptical about that. I don't think they really did a lot in the offseason here except for shed some money. Here's how I figured out where the Rams are. 9 wins last year, just missing the playoffs, 8.8 Pythagorean, 8.9 is the average. They were pretty healthy last year, so I actually took off 3 quarters of a game. They were fine last year, okay? Strength of schedule last year was hard. I'll give them a game back for that, but it's medium hard this year. I'm going to take away a half game, so they're up there. You have -2 on the key losses for all the key guys that they lost in free agency. I took away a lot because I thought they lost a lot there. All right. And I'm giving them only a quarterback for draft and free agency, which brings me to 7.9 wins. The win total is 8.5, juiced to the under. So unfortunately, I don't have a play on this team either. And we are just going to have to watch and see what happens with good old Sean McVay if he can beat the narrative. Lots of people have bet the under on this team. I'm not quite there yet. It's hard for me to bet against Sean McVay. Last and not least, the Arizona Cardinals, and they might not be least this year because there's some pretty big expectations on them. Their Vegas win total is 7.5. All right. Their at-large games are against Detroit and Washington. How wonderful is that? Key losses. David Johnson, but he didn't do that much. Kenyon Drake's better anyway, right? Rodney Gunter, defensive end. Tight end, Charles Clay. Key additions. Wide receiver, DeAndre Hopkins. Defensive end, Jordan Phillips. Outside linebacker, Devin Kennard from the Lions, and outside linebacker, Devondre Campbell, who they drafted. Linebacker, Isaiah Simmons. And tackle, Josh Jones. Defensive tackle, Leki Fotu. And linebacker, Evan Weaver. All right. That's a lot. These guys stacked up this year. And I'll tell you, I was a little wrong last year on Kyler Murray. I was a little bit wrong, but not wrong enough to where I lost the under 6 season win total bet on them, because thank goodness they tied the Detroit Lions and didn't come back and beat them. Right? I actually had to adjust their wins from 5 to 5.5 because of that tie starting out. I love what this team did in the offseason. They stole DeAndre Hopkins from the Texans. Absolutely stole them. Don't know what Bill O'Brien's doing over there. just don't know what their GM's doing. Just terrible. They didn't even have to give up their best running back in Kenyon Drake for that. Johnson's was good, but he was very injury prone. So I like how they fixed their defense, getting Jordan Phillips and Devondre Campbell. And I think the Cardinals could definitely be the most improved team in the league. I love Simmons. I kind of wanted an offensive lineman there. And that's the only problem that I had, is that they didn't really address their offensive line, minus drafting a kind of a reach tackle with Josh Jones from Houston in the third round. But the good news is when you have a quarterback like Kyler Murray, it's kind of like having a Russell Wilson or Lamar Jackson. Your offensive line doesn't have to be elite or great because you're such a threat rolling out on the outside and with your legs. Okay, so it's not as bad. So I have their wins at 8.1 this year in saying that. And so they're already looked at as high from Vegas. This is one of those ones I was kind of hoping there was going to come at 6.5 or 7 from the 5 last year, but the hype on the Cardinals is real. Okay. I'll tell you how I got there. Let's take a look here. 5.5 wins. 6 was Pythag, so I have 5.8. 0 for injuries. +1, you're giving them a game back for a super hard schedule last year. Medium schedule, not taking anything away this year. Key losses, only a quarter point I'm removing from their losses. Draft and free agency, +1.5. I thought they did very well in free agency, especially with DeAndre Hopkins. So that brings me to 8.1 wins. So I'm going to lean to the over. But what I like better here is a play maybe for a 3/4 of a unit on taking the division at +600. Right? Not too many teams have a win total of 7.5, and you can actually get +600 for them to win the division. So here's what could happen. San Fran's got a very tough schedule. Maybe that whole problem with Jimmy G and Kyle Shanahan actually comes into fruition. You know, maybe they drop a game against Arizona, right? So that could happen. I mean, they got to play the Saints, the Packers. Pretty tough schedule. And if you look at the Seahawks and the Rams, their win totals aren't that far away from the Cardinals. So it's really not that far-fetched to think that one of the easier schedules in this division could possibly win the division by maybe tying Seattle or tying the 49ers in the regular season, but kind of getting the nod for some of their conference wins. That could absolutely happen. So I kind of like a small investment in the big plus money at +600 for 3/4 of a unit. All right, let's move on to the NFC East here. The NFC East. Sorry ass division. Seriously. The Giants and the Redskins were awful. And even with how bad these two teams were, you still couldn't get two teams into the playoffs between the Eagles and the Cowboys.
That's terrible.
Just terrible. Let's take a look at this thing. The division, they play the NFC West and the AFC North, which I would call a medium schedule. I mean, the Bengals still have a huge climb uphill here, even though they have Joe Burrow. The Browns are the Browns. The Steelers have regressed a bit. The NFC West is obviously hard, but their lowest win total is the Cardinals, as I just discussed, at 7.5. This was clearly the worst division in football, clearly. And you wonder if you're going to get two teams into the playoffs this year. I don't think so. But the big question for me in this whole division, is this the year that Dak Prescott proves his worth? He was 4th in QBR last year, but as you saw, he didn't start the games out that well. Philadelphia Eagles, they made the playoffs. Their Vegas win total is 9.5, juiced to the over -125. Schedule is medium. At-large games versus Green Bay and New Orleans. Almost hard, really. Key losses. Guard Halapoulivaati Vaitai. Free safety Malcolm Jenkins. Running back Jordan Howard. Cornerback Ronald Darby. Wide receiver Nelson Aguilar. Outside linebacker Camus Gregory Hill. Josh McCown, quarterback, and left tackle Jason Peters isn't signed, and I wonder if he is. I remember he was looked at as the best left tackle in football. Key additions: defensive tackle Javon Hargraves and safety Will Parks, cornerback Nickel Roby-Coleman, who they drafted. Wide receiver, Jalen Reagor from TCU. Quarterback, Jalen, does it still hurt that he was picked so early for my pocketbook? And cornerback, Kayvon Wallace. Offensive tackle, Jack Driscoll. The Eagles team, in my opinion, I think they kind of lost a lot of players, and their draft was a real head-scratcher. After the Cowboys cock-blocked them, and that's exactly what they did. They cock-blocked him, drafted CeeDee Lamb, and went for a guy that was projected to go in the late second, early third round in Jalen Reagor. I was shocked that they kind of that they did that they went for that, and they were thinking they were going to get Lamb, in my opinion, and they got Reagor. So yeah. The Eagles. I don't know what they were doing with Jalen Hurts there. I don't know. I guess it makes sense when you think about Carson Wentz and all his injuries. But why don't you keep him McCown on for one more year? You know, what if Wentz gets hurt early? You know, and so yeah, Wentz did play all last year, though. He was careful and he wasn't nearly as injury prone, but it just scratched a head scratcher that they got hurt so early. They needed other things. They needed secondary help. They needed some offensive line help, some edge rusher stuff. You know, they're at large games, obviously tough. You know, obviously Green Bay and New Orleans, but I just don't see how they got better from last year. I also don't like it that they have to go to Green Bay and they get the Saints at home. When you have the two hardest at-large games, I like to have the easier team at home and the harder team on the road, because the harder team, you're probably going to lose anyway. You know, it's kind of like that wild card. If you win, great, you know. But now they're probably going to lose both of their at-large games here. So in this situation, I like having the easier team at home. At least you're guaranteed a win and a split when you have the toughest at-large schedule. So got to tell you, this team, I don't know how their win total is 9.5, juiced to the over at minus 125, because I think I see regression. They are a shell of their Super Bowl team. They had 9 wins last year. 8.8 was their Pythagorean. So you start with 8.9. Not going to give them or take away anything for injuries last year. Wentz lasted the whole year, so did the running backs. Schedule was medium easy last year. Take away a half game for that. Schedule is medium this year. Not going to make any adjustments. Their key losses, all those guys, I'm taking away a game and a half, only giving them a half game back for their draft and free agency. That puts me at 7.4 wins when the win total is 9.5. All right. Now, I know they get the Giants twice. I know they get the Redskins twice. They're probably going to win 3 of those 4 games. But the fact that I think they lose both of their at-large games, I think they lose both to the Cowboys. I think when they play the NFC West, they're probably going to lose 2 or 3 of those games. And they're going to lose to the Ravens, and they have a chance of losing to the Steelers and the Browns. I just don't see how they can get to 9.5 wins. This is a good play, a premium play. Couple units on this one for sure, and I don't like to put a lot of units on this. We are going under 9.5 for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Where's my money, bitch?
Number 2, the Dallas Cowboys. Vegas win total, 9.5, juice to the over, minus 145. So it's roughly like 9.85 is the real number. Schedule, medium easy. Their at-large games is against the Minnesota Vikings and the Atlanta Falcons. That's fantastic. Key losses. Coach, Jason Garrett. Cornerback, Byron Jones. Outside linebacker, Robert Quinn. Defensive tackle, Malik Collins. Wide receiver, Randall Cobb. Strong safety, Jeff Heath. Tight end, Jason Wilson. Wide receiver, Tavon Austin. Key additions. Coach, Mike McCarthy. Defensive tackle, Gerald McCoy. Kicker, Legatron, Greg Zerline. Free safety, HaHa Clinton Dix. Quarterback, Andy Dalton. Cornerback, Darrell Worthy. And tackle, Cameron Irving. Whom they drafted. Wide receiver, CeeDee Lamb. Cornerback, Trayvon Diggs. Defensive line, Neville Gallimore. Center guard, Tyler Biadasz from the Badgers. Big D made a ton of moves this year. All right. One of them was obviously their coach. Jerry Jones used to defend Jason Garrett like he was his only child, like his only son. But then all of a sudden, finally, he moves on to another coach, which will suck up to him just like Garrett had to in Michael McCarthy. All right. So I'm not quite sure if that's really an upgrade to me. You know, you can ask any Packer fan, and they're not going to tell you it's an upgrade for sure. All right. I'm just wondering about Dak Prescott, really. Can he put it together? Can he do it for a full football game instead of starting out bad the first half and coming back the second half? They didn't really address their pass rush, in my opinion, after they lost Robert Quinn to the Chicago Bears. They decided to be flashy instead and draft CeeDee Lamb to cockblock the Eagles, as we all know. One big thing that sticks out to me is that their Pythagorean wins last year was high. 10.9. They scored some points. They blew out some teams, came back a lot in some of their close losses. So the 8 actual wins, I don't think is that accurate. I even think that Dallas could have could have done better, in the offseason. I have them slated to win the division, even though they didn't do better. But that's just because the division is so easy, and I see regression from the Eagles. I think they're going to get at least 10 wins here. All right. And here's how I get to that number. You look at the Cowboys, 8 wins, 10.9 is Pythag, so 9.5 we're starting at. Remember, we only started at 8.9 with the Eagles. 0 for age and injury adjustment. Medium easy schedule last year, so I had to take away a half game. Medium easy this year, give them a half game back. I'm going to take away a game and a half for what they lost. They did lose a lot of players, but they gained a lot of players too. And 1.75, that's a net quarter game up. So my number is 9.75 on the Cowboys. Now, that's not going to warrant a bet when it's more like 9.85 on their season win total. But I do think that they win this division, which is only at like plus 110 for them to do it. If you go shopping for books, you're not going to get a ton of value there either. So just because I think the Cowboys are going to win the division doesn't mean I think they're going to necessarily blow it out of the water. They're probably going to win 10 or 11 games. If Dak gets injured, I could see them winning 9 games with Andy Dalton. I think Andy Dalton was a good move to push Dak. And I actually think Dalton's a much better player than most people give him credit for. I think his team absolutely sucked around him. So that's what you got for the Cowboys. No play, but I do think that they will win the division. The next team we have to go into is the New York Giants. Vegas win total is 6.5, juice to the under at minus 130. Schedule is hard. At large versus Tampa Bay and Chicago. Key losses: wide receiver Cody Lattimore, defensive tackle Michael Thomas, linebacker Alec Ogletree, and free safety Antoine Bethea. Key additions: cornerback James Bradbury, inside linebacker Blake Martinez, linebacker Kyle Fackrell, linebacker Levine Toliolo, free safety Nate Ebner, running back Deion Lewis, defensive tackle Austin Johnson, and a ton more. The Giants picked up a ton of players. They're going to have to cut some, but they did pick up a ton. Their draft was Andrew Thomas, that big tackle from Georgia. I think he was the first tackle off the board. First lineman from offensive lineman off the board, and safety from Alabama, Xavier McKinney. That's about it. I didn't love the rest of their draft. the team's looking to improve on those 4 wins from last year, right? I mean, and it looks like they're getting rid of a lot of old salary. They're rebuilding. They're getting younger, but they had a terrible defense last year and suffered some key injuries to guys like Evan Ingram, Golden Tate. Saquon Barkley missed a few games. So the major moves start right in the defense. They picked up a few linebackers from Green Bay, right? Green Bay was pissed at their linebackers probably from the San Fran game, and the Giants picked them up. I think there's a lot of scheme problems, actually, personally, more than the linebackers and maybe on the D-line. But anyways, a bunch of average Joes, it seems like, besides them. So nothing too exciting for me. I couldn't give them a huge bump in free agency. I do like 2 of their draft picks, but I'm not sure if it's enough to make a huge difference here. Unfortunately, for the Giants, they get difficult at large opponents. They have to host Tampa Bay, all right? Host Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Bucks, and they have to go to Chicago. So Chicago's looked at as the inferior team, and it's the same deal. They have to go to the easier one and get the harder one at home. Could be 2 losses right there. Another rough year for the G-Men, possibly. The schedule ranks second hardest in football if you look at it from a Vegas season win total. All right? And I actually got to 5.7 wins. Their win total is at 6.5. I thought I was pretty generous to get to 5.7. 4 wins. Pythag was 5.3 last year, so you give them a 4.7. Give them a game. Give them a full game for their injuries that I just went over. Medium schedule last year at 0. Hard schedule -1 this year. Going to take away a quarter point for what they lost. And since they picked up a ton of guys, I'm going to give them a game and a quarter back. That brings me to 5.7. Absolutely no play. And that brings us to our final team in the whole NFC East division, the lowly Washington Redskins. Vegas win total is 5.5, juice to the under at -130. Oh. Schedule is medium hard at large versus Detroit and Carolina. Key losses: guard Eric Flowers, quarterback Case Keenum, cornerback Josh Norman. Key additions: cornerback Kendall Fuller, guard Wes Schweitzer, free safety Sean Davis, cornerback Ronald Darby, running back Peyton Barber, and inside linebacker Kevin Pierre-Louis from the Bears, whom they drafted, edge rusher Chase Young, and a bunch of garbage. I'm concerned for the past successes in Ohio State of Dwayne Haskins, and I'm just starting to think to myself that maybe he is in NFL. Maybe he's just a product of Ohio State football schemes and playbook rather than any translation to the NFL. We've seen this before with Buckeye quarterbacks, Cardale Jones, Braxton Miller, JT Barrett, right? So the good news is that they've secured the best player in the draft, in my opinion, in Chase Young. But that certainly isn't enough to turn this team around, in my opinion. Washington went with a running back with their next pick, which was in the 3rd round. Big head scratcher to me. Guy from Memphis. The Redskins, they didn't lose much in the offseason, but they also didn't have much to lose. I mean, their team was pretty bad, right? I think they're the worst team in the NFL because they had 3 wins and their Pythagorean was only 3.7. I actually think they're a little bit worse than the Bengals. Their key additions doesn't exactly light up the board either because they just got Chase Young and a couple of guys in the key additions here in free agency. So if there's any good news, their at-large games are pretty easy against Detroit and Carolina. But the problem is Detroit and Carolina are both better than the Washington Redskins. Here's kind of how I have it broke down. 3 and 3.7. Pythag make it 3.4. 0 for injuries. They have a medium hard schedule at -0.5. Last year, they have a medium hard schedule this year at plus 0.5 games. Taking away a quarter game for who they lost. Giving them back 0.75 for pretty much drafting Chase Young, a 3/4 of a game. That only brings me to 3.9 wins. Now, 3.9 wins is pretty dang low, but so is the win total of 5.5. So I'm not sure if I'm going to play it. I'm going to give you a strong lean to the under right now because it's juiced to the under. But at the same time, I wouldn't have any problem with anybody playing this win total. All right. Well, hey, thanks a lot for listening to this podcast. Really appreciate all of your support. Have a fantastic Memorial Day weekend. Looks like there's some horse racing going on. Churchill Downs will be happening. Might have a few plays on that as well. Enjoy, be safe, and go get some winners.